Welcome back to the Tech Startup Network podcast. Joining me today is Jesus Vidaurri, a community and ecosystem builder, entrepreneur, and talent strategist passionate about creating spaces where people, ideas, and innovation thrive. He is the founder and CEO of Tampa Bay Tech Week, a community-led initiative designed to bring together founders, technologists, investors, creatives, and builders while elevating the Tampa Bay region as a destination for innovation and opportunity. He's also the founder and principal consultant of Vida Talent Solutions, where he advises startups and growth stage organizations on talent strategy, AI, and modern recruiting practices. Jesus, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. You have a super impressive bio for our listeners who are tuning in to check out in the show notes, but that's where I'd love to start off and kick off this episode is by having you introduce yourself and what you do.
Yeah, so I think you covered a good portion of what I do. It's funny because a lot of people are like, "Well, what do you do right now?" And I get a little stuck because I've been doing a lot recently. My wife even tells me like, "You need to slow down." Um, so yeah, I mean, professionally, my career started off in technical recruiting. So like as a trade, that's what I do, right? So I work in talent acquisition, talent strategy. And workforce development recently, right? That's kind of where my experiences has really have taken me over the last couple of years, and my entire time has been spent in the technology space. So I started very early on in staffing, where I mostly recruited cybersecurity folks in the
Mhm.
very beginning, and then that quickly spread to multiple different facets of technology. But yeah, I mean, outside of my professional work, like again, from a recruiting talent acquisition standpoint, I do that currently for the federal government. Outside of that, as you mentioned, I also have my own consulting firm with Vida Talent Solutions, where I help startups and mid-sized companies really figure out how to recruit, not necessarily do the recruiting for them, but teach them how to. The analogy I like to use is teach them how to fish, so I don't have to fish for you,
Mhm.
sort of thing. And then, of course, like obviously the conversation around AI, a lot of folks in operational type roles like HR, accounting, legal, are really trying to figure out how they implement it. And so I've been spending a lot of time really educating folks on how to properly implement it and how to think about it from a operational strategy standpoint. Um, and then I think the last part that really dives into, and this is why I say like it becomes a long like what do you do sort of a response. And that's been Tampa Bay Tech Week, right? Which is I think a large portion of what I think our conversation is going to be today. But yeah, I mean I've been a community builder for I would say almost half of my career.
Mhm.
So if we're talking almost 12, 13 years of, my work experience, almost half of that has been spent, going to meetups, going to conferences, and really just helping, at the very beginning, it was really just helping people find jobs. And that's more so evolved now into just creating opportunity, and economic impact across different facets, right? So whether that's helping people find jobs, helping businesses find clients or helping startups find funding. I think it's kind of wrapped all itself into that. So yeah, so that's kind of what I've been doing the last couple of years.
I
So
love it. And I especially love that Tampa Bay Tech Week, like we were chatting about before we began recording, it's just like so in tune with what you do as you specialize in talent, strategy, AI, all of that stuff. But I'm curious, like, what actually led you to start Tampa Bay Tech Week? Was there a moment where you were like, we need something like this in the Tampa Bay region? I know you said you've always been a community builder, but would love to hear if there was one defining moment that really sparked everything from there.
yeah, I've been asked this question multiple times, and my response remains pretty much the same. But you know, the way I really like to start responding to this question is, when I used to, like I said, I recruit for the government, and like 2 years ago, and I really started back in the start of COVID. Really, I spent some time at the White House, so I got a chance to, bring technical talent into the government, and a lot of my time there really allowed me to travel across different cities, across different conferences, and quite honestly, different tech weeks. And
Mhm.
the one that stood out to me that I'll never forget, and to this day, I'm very good friends with the people in that region, and I try to go every single year, and that's Atlanta Tech Week.
Mhm.
So Atlanta has this very incredible tech week that they started about 5 years ago. So really at the start of like right after COVID, kind of, people were coming out and we're ready to kind of get back out there. It was actually a combination of a conference called Render ATL that they also did. So it was like a developer conference that they kind of rolled into a tech week, and so that sat right in the middle. And I remember just going there and just experiencing a tech week like that for the first time. And I had been to like South by Southwest, I've been to Afro Tech, I've been to, many other different conferences and tech weeks in other regions. But this one felt like home. Like it felt like a home away from home. And it really felt like I was in the South, like in Atlanta. Like I felt like I was from Atlanta and I was learning and I was, making really great connections. And I said to myself, I'm like, why don't we have something like this in Tampa? And just the Bay Area region here locally, or we refer to it as Bay Area. I know San Francisco also is the Bay Area. But and we've had some pretty good conferences here in Tampa, but I would say they're very hyper localized in a way that doesn't really bring the community outside of Tampa Bay to it.
Hmm.
And that was the major difference for me is like when you go to Atlanta Tech Week, you got 5 to 10,000 people that show up across the entire week,
Oh my
and it's people
gosh.
from all over the country, right? And so, here we had a couple other like, what I would consider conferences or events, and they were more like one day things, but most people aren't going to travel to another city for one day, right? They
Hmm.
want to make an experience out of it. Most corporate companies aren't going to invest in a single day conference or a single day event, especially if they're not from here. If they have major offices here, sure, they'll invest the dollars into making sure that their employees attend and that they have a sponsorship package and all that good stuff. But most other companies, right, like the Googles of the world, the Amazons, the Salesforces, like they're not going to spend the time and investment into a one day thing. So I said to myself, I've also spent 15 years in Tampa recruiting and living and all that. And I've seen this place grow from what it was 15 years ago. I mean, and if I were to pull up some pictures for you of like 2010 to 2015 to today, I mean, it is vastly different. Like it just
Hmm.
the landscape physically looks, I mean, it's unrecognizable from 15 years ago. Especially a very particular portion of our city called Water Street, which is right by the port, right where all the cruise ships are. If you ever been to Tampa, you'll see it. Um, and it's a skyrise that just went up in a matter of like 5 years, 5 to 7 years. And really, I think like that's been the start of kind of this transition of us becoming this like C tier, B tier city to now I think we're really becoming like an A tier city.
Hmm.
Um, and it's just nice to live here, right? Like we're by the water. It's very like outdoorsy. So I think there's a lot of factors that really like led me to think, maybe now is the time to do that. And I know this is a very long response, but I think all that to say
Yeah.
that, the start of it was seeing a blueprint and saying to myself, well, we can replicate that, but also like add our own flavor to it, right? Add our own culture to it. And that's ultimately what culminated into this year's first Tampa Bay Tech Week.
Oh my gosh, incredible. And so even though it was only the first year, like, of course, this has been something that it sounds like has been brewing for a few years now at this point. So, like, what does it take to actually start a tech week? Because I've been seeing, especially like over this past year, people just really want in-person events again. They want community, they want to be face to face with people. And so what you've delivered is incredible, but I would love to hear kind of like the ins and outs of just actually pulling it all together and bringing in such amazing partners to help bring it to life.
Yeah, I think if I had to drill it down to like 2 to 3 things, I think number one, it has to be for the community, right? Yeah,
Hmm.
like community has to be in mind first. It can't be, someone trying to make a quick buck or like put their name ahead or anything like that. I think you really have to think about what is a community seeking? And I'll
Hmm.
tell you just from somebody who's been here for a while, like I've had conversations with a lot of really good community builders in the region who have also said, why haven't we had this, right? I mean, I remember like 2, 3 years ago, I sat down with another group that this individual, like she's been a huge community builder for a long time, and I think just like her job was tougher like for her to start it at the time. But I
Hmm.
remember us having conversations like, man, what if we did a tech week? Like we started drawing it all out. It was whiteboarded, and this was like 2 years ago, right? And at some point, I said to myself like, well, hopefully, we can launch this soon, and And so I think like that again, going back to like that first point, like it has to be community driven. You have to have the community in mind. I think secondly, it takes a little bit of politicking and social capital, right? I think if I'm responding directly to your question of like what does it take to build one, you can't just be some random person that just walks off the street and says like, "Hey, I want to do this." Like
Yeah.
people have to have some sort of understanding of who you are, what you do, do you have the right intentions? And, at some point when you start talking about a vision this big, regardless of what region you're in, you have to know your city, right? Like you
Hmm.
have to know it better than anyone else. And you know, it requires you to really step out of your comfort zone and ask for help.
Hmm.
And I think that's kind of like the last piece of it is like it cannot be done by yourself. I don't care who you are. You could be, you could have the most amount of financial resources or the most amount of people in your network, but if you think that you can do it by yourself, then it's going to be a very hard road.
Hmm.
Because there are a lot of pieces. I mean, essentially, we started a business out of this thing, right? And it needed to be ran that way. Otherwise, I don't think it would have been successful the same way that we felt like it was. So I think like those are some of the three main components. And of course, like every city has its own flavor. Every region has its own flavor. So whether it's Tampa Bay Tech Week or Boston Tech Week or even if you're in another country, right? Everybody has its own flavor. And I think you really have to draw into that, right? Like what makes you
Hmm.
so special that when people come here, it's going to be memorable. And even the people that are here, they're going to be like, yeah, that's Tampa, right? Like, or yeah,
Hmm.
that's Boston, right? It feels like you're from here. And I think like that was a secret sauce is, when we got the feedback from people like, yeah, like the craft beer, the cigars, the water, the like, it felt like I was in Florida and it felt like I was in Tampa. And I think that's what made it special. And yeah, I think that's at least from my perspective, I think those are some of like the foundational building blocks that you have to build a tech week.
100%. Oh my gosh, that was like such amazing advice to share there. And I especially love what you mentioned about one, not being able to do it alone, but two, the piece about social capital, which is huge. It's like, as you mentioned, you can't do something of this caliber but with one person, but also being able to have the right people that you can bring in and help to support you is amazing. And so it's very clear that one, you're pa really passionate about this, and two, that you've been able to have such great partners to help you bring this along, even beyond Tech Week and having events outside of that. So that's what I'd love to talk about now is how this has really grown and expanded beyond just the 1 week to now have events throughout the year.
Yeah, again, we talked a little bit about this before the show, right? Like, I think the biggest, you know, again, I don't think we're recording at this point, but I mentioned that like, the biggest downfall of I think a lot of events like this is that momentum, right? They lose the
Hmm.
momentum. People when they get excited about something, they want more, right?
Hmm.
It's just like, I mean, you can take even a simple example of like social media, right? Like when people like good content, they want more of it. And when they don't have more of that content, they lose interest and maybe they unfollow you or maybe they just stop looking at your stuff. And I think that's the same thing with events, especially in person. It's like, what's the next thing and what is going to make it unique so that it doesn't become stagnant, right? Like
Hmm.
I think there's a couple things that you can recycle and you can redo and things that obviously like if people gave you the direct feedback of like, oh, that particular workshop was amazing. We want you to do that again. Absolutely, right? If that's what the people want, that's what we're going to deliver. But I think it's taking those components and really figuring out again what is working for your audience. What do they want more of, and what's going to keep it fresh.
Hmm.
Um, but in terms of like, for us, what we really started to think about is like, how do we turn this into a brand, right? It's not just you know, it's not just a Tech Week thing anymore, right? Like Tech Week is a week, right? So, some of the other things that like me and my business partners and my co-founder and the people that work alongside me for Tech Week, it's like, how do we actually roll this into a brand that makes sense year round,
Hmm.
right? Because we want people to recognize Tech Week, but we also want people to recognize the other events that are happening throughout the year that might not necessarily be Tech Week. Like, yes, we have like our palm tree logo, as you see on my shirt. Um, but people are going to recognize that, but also like, like we have 727 Day coming up and 813
Hmm.
Tech Day. And those are very unique to the two area codes that are part of the Tampa Bay area, but they're not necessarily Tech Week. Like
Hmm.
they're Tech Days, they're rolled into the brand, but how are we going to make them unique so that people from St. Pete feel like they got what they wanted out of 727 Tech Day, and people in Tampa got what they wanted out of 813 Tech Day? And then, hopefully, fingers crossed, we have some really exciting stuff happening in the fall. We'll be partnering up to do a more like long-term like AI week, right? So those are
Oh,
some
love it.
preliminary conversations. And that'll be more of a partnership collaboration effort. But it's like things like that, and that's another component that I didn't mention, right? It's like lean into those collaborations and partnerships.
Hmm.
It's one thing to like build the thing with people, but you also can't like host 100 events by yourself. Like it's just
Right.
not like it's just not feasible. So it's like, what portion of that do you own, and what other portion of that do you lean into other community partners to say, hey, you guys are good at that. You have an audience here. Take that and run with it. Whether it's like you know, a workshop or a panel, or maybe they're doing something on raising capital, right? So like if they're good at that, like lean into that and ask them, do you want to partner on this, right? Do you want to collaborate? And worst thing people can say is no, right? And if there's anything recruiting taught me, it's that is like you're gonna get a lot of no's before you get a yes. Uh,
Yep.
so yeah, I think those are just a couple of things that I can, mention just related to like keeping that momentum going after the event happens and something like a tech week, and really figuring out, how do you make it fresh? How do you make it consistent? And how do you give the people what they want?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, as you mentioned, finding those collaborations and partnerships are huge because they're mutually beneficial across three parties. Like one organization is benefiting from the other organization's reach and network and vice versa. And then the people who are showing up to these events and these types of collaboration efforts are really getting a lot of value out of it as well. And I think one thing that is really awesome about Tampa Bay Tech Week for you all specifically is that it helps from a retention standpoint, I feel like. Because I feel like with all like the other tech weeks, it's like there's maybe that 2 month ramp up leading up to the tech week, announcing the events, getting people excited. And then there might be things online for the few weeks after that of photos and whatnot. But then social media just goes silent for the next 10 months or 9 months. So being able for you as a retention piece to just keep people within the community and nurtured all year long, I mean, you're just going to end up seeing exponential growth in the next year.
Yeah, I mean that's the hope. And the other thing too is like you mentioned something, and I really wanted to draw into that because like I think the other part of it is, you mentioned like there's this mutual beneficial factor from the different parties, but then you talked about like the audience member themselves and what they get out of it. And
Mhm.
really like, especially more recently, because anecdotally, like this happened to me like last week. I was at another tech event, and just supporting the community, another big group that does stuff here in Tampa. And I had a woman come up to me and said, "Oh my God, like what you did with Tech Week like changed my life."
Mhm.
And it was interesting because like you don't really think about it, but because you're in the chaos of, especially when you're leading the thing, right? There's 1,000 people that show up to this thing, and yes, you want to meet everybody, you want to shake everybody's hand, you want to give everybody the same attention, but it's like almost damn near impossible, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think I met this woman at the tech week, but when she said that to me, she said, like I showed up to some of the sessions, and then was this one panel that really just like flipped my world upside down because she's the head of engineering. She talked about how she's been trying to get into the family business of manufacturing, and there's this one panel that just seemed to have talked about something related to that, really stood out to her. And then from there she's been having like almost daily to weekly conversations about transitioning the business to her and helping her father and really standing up that manufacturing business so that it can come to the States and really take off from there. And like to think that like now the trajectory of her career might be shifting because of a tech week, and really like if she grows this business that her father started, like that's a generational sort of impact, right? And that's like
Yeah.
I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. But like to me, that's like that's amazing, right? Because it's like you're making this impact, that you don't even realize you're making, and and you're doing it unintentionally, right? Sort of like you're creating good content because you want people to get something out of it, but you
Mhm.
don't know what people are going to get out of it. You're just hoping that something comes about it, whether it's a job, whether it's a new business partner or some funding or whatever. And when you actually hear the story weeks later of like how much this is actually making an impact on their lives, you're like, man, like that's incredible. So anyway, I wanted to share that because I think especially for other builders that are out there, people that are putting on events or conferences or whatever, like sure, like sometimes whether you're a nonprofit, whether you're for profit, whatever it is, like there are obviously things that like you need a business to stand up and like
Mhm.
grow it and maintain it. But when you get out of that zone of like operational and business and finance, and you really sit down and think, wow, what I'm doing actually is improving people's lives, it becomes a little bit like, surreal. It's like wow, you're actually making this impact. So anyway, I just wanted to share that story.
Love that story and so glad that you brought it up because that is one thing I really had been thinking about is just the amount of gratification you and your team must feel from hearing stories like that. Is someone being able to help create generational wealth because the business is now going over to her in the future, or someone might find a job, or they might meet someone that turns into a partnership or starting a business together. Like there's so many long-lasting impacts that can come from one single event. So I imagine that that's really what fuels you all is just being able to hear stories like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely part of it, right? I mean, but the other thing is like, before we came in, other than the one event that I think really, at some point it was starting to fizzle out. Um, I think there just wasn't anything here, and I think that's why people really felt overwhelmed in a positive way by
Hmm.
the impact of Tech Week because, it's like, well, if we hadn't done that, would these same things have happened, right? Would
Hmm.
people be connecting the same way? It's almost like, and it's strange because like you look at some of the events that are happening now, and it's like a lot of these people kind of saw each other at Tech Week, and now they're seeing each other again, whether it's like our events or other people's events. You can just feel the energy is different. Like
Hmm.
I don't know what it is, but like even when I go out and I'm going to a networking event or a mixer or some workshop or something that's being hosted by other people, obviously it feels a little different for me because now people know me as the Tech Week guy here in Tampa. But also like when you look at even some of the other organizers, it's like they're moving differently, right? And
Hmm.
I don't know, that's because like not that they feel pressure by what we built, but like I felt like they also feel compelled to give something really great to the people in the community. So it's kind of like push everybody else to really build good content, good programming, and we're only going to continue to step it up, right?
Yeah.
So my hope is that others feel the same way, and not again, not in any sort of competitive way because that's not what it's supposed to be. But I do think that like, and this is, I said this actually at a mixer. We did like a pre-tech week mixer to like promote the week and get people out there. But I said this, and as I reflect back on it, I really meant what I said, and that's if we want to be like we don't want to be a Silicon Valley. That's not our
Hmm.
intention. I think everybody, if you look at a lot of groups that are out there, if you look at conferences or tech weeks that they're trying to replicate Silicon Valley. I'm like, we're not Silicon Valley. We'll never be Silicon Valley. That's not our intention. Because we have our own culture, we have our own sets of people. There's people that are leaving Silicon Valley to come out here,
Yeah.
right? Because the culture is a lot slower. And that's not a good thing or a bad thing. That's just what people like. Um, but I say that to say that like if we even hope to compete with other cities like in Austin, like a Boston, like a San Francisco, like they have a lot going for them. They have a lot of really good schools, a lot of really great corporate companies, really great startup culture, and we're there. We just need people to know about us.
Hmm.
And if we want that to happen, then we need to step it up. We need to not just do events locally, but invite people from out of town, right? So, again, the worst thing they can say is no. But if you host a really banging event and you're like, hey, you have a really good community out in New York. Here's some tickets. I'd love to invite you. Come down here, bring your audience, and you do that with a couple different cities, and you'd be surprised when people come here, the perspective that they will leave with.
Yeah.
And that was actually part of our strategy is, we really wanted to bring a lot of people from out of town so that they can firsthand see what we've been talking about. Like Tampa is
Hmm.
special. And once you come down here, you're gonna realize how special it is. And whether that like motivates you to move down here or not, at least you're talking about us, right? You're going back home to New York. It's December, it's freezing cold, or January or Boston, right? And you're like, man, I remember I went to Tech Week and it was so sunny and great, and we went to the beach right after. And you're gonna come back next week, next year, right? And
Yep.
so there's a little bit of an intention there of like why we held it in April too, and it's like the start of spring break, and usually for most folks it's around that time. Um, but at the end of the day, it's about like again, how do we set up Tampa Bay to be on the national stage and be
Hmm.
recognized because we have so much going for us, like that people don't even realize. I remember I had a conversation with a person, and I was like, "Did you know that we have one of the top cybersecurity unicorns in the entire world here in Tampa Bay?" And I'm like, "No, I didn't even know who they were." Right? And that's ReliQuest. And it's just like companies like that, Johnson and Johnson, Citibank, Raymond James. Like there's so many companies here that you ask somebody like, well, what's in Tampa? And they're like, and then I start rattling off companies. They're like, oh, okay, like I didn't realize, right? And so it's like,
Yeah.
it's just things like that. But anyway, now I'm just rattling off.
No, you actually led me into like the perfect segue for the next question that I wanted to ask you, which is I always love asking our guests for their location, why it's such a good location for
Mm.
anyone in tech. So you nailed it perfectly by listing off all of the prominent companies that are building in Tampa. But what else about the Bay Area really stands out to you to be such a good spot to be for the tech people?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's tough. Before I'd say the housing market. But it's a little up in the air depending on where you go. I mean, Florida's still great if we're talking just like straight facts and like, from a financial standpoint, like the housing market's great. It's not
Hmm.
relative to the rest of the country, but we don't have state income tax, or yeah, we don't have state tax and city tax like some other places do. But also like the Bay Area in general, I think a couple of things that stand out to me. I think one, it's growing. Like it
Hmm.
is, I mean, it is booming. If you come here, you'll see, I mean, if you just go to the suburbs, like I live in the outskirts of Tampa, like 20 minutes away, 25 minutes away. And it's just like builder after builder after builder out here, right? So there's a lot of homes that are being built. Um, but also, I mean, if you go to downtown, if you go to other portions of the city, like Ybor City right now is going through a major renovation. And for people that are familiar with Tampa, they know Ybor City as like the spot, right? But what they don't know is that like it's been neglected for many years, because it's just a tough place to build in. You need the wealth to come in and the people that are willing to invest in that development. And that's been happening. We had Water Street that came up. That was funded by a gentleman named Jeff Finnick. He's the guy that actually owns the Lightning, or owned the Lightning. I don't know what that status of that person is right now, but the guy was a billionaire, and he saw something special in Tampa, and he said, "I'm gonna throw $1 billion into this thing and see what happens." And look at what Water Street has become. And the same thing is happening in St. Pete. The same thing is happening in Ybor. We also have some other places like closer to the University of South Florida that are being redeveloped. So like from in terms of like a city, like before we didn't have a midtown. We had a downtown, we didn't have an uptown, we didn't have a midtown. Now all these places are sprouting out.
Hmm.
Um, and then we're really leaning into our waterfront, right? Like, I mean, we have a 7 mile stretch of like a sidewalk that people can run on. So it's a pretty big like fitness community too, right? You have people that are doing high rocks and runs and all kinds of stuff. So it's like you kind of get the best of both worlds with like whether it's like you like being inside and going to like events or concerts or live music or whatever. And then you also have like people that want to do outdoorsy stuff, right? With the waterfront, the kayaking, the running, the all kinds of good stuff. But also like it's the culture, right? It's
Hmm.
like it's just something unique about when you come here. Like again, you come here and if you just like, and I don't know if you've ever been personally. If you haven't, we got to bring you down here, actually.
Yeah.
But if you just walk the streets of Ybor, I mean, you'll admire the authenticity of the city. And I mean, again, like there's just some really, it's a rich culture of people, like, the diversity of the people here, the food, the music. The music we're still trying to figure out. I think there's like a unique taste to it. I mean, Florida has its own unique set of musical undertones, but I think when you lean into all of that, right, that's what people are moving to cities for. It's not because
Hmm.
of tech. Like, sure, the tech is there. You have really great jobs. Um, but people move because they like a place and that's where they want to be. Um, but then the last thing I'll just say, and again, I got off on a tangent here, but as it relates to like the technology front, right? I mentioned a bunch of corporate companies, but what a lot of people don't realize is over the last couple of years, we've been booming in the startup space. I mean, I think right now we're probably close to like 3 to 5 thousand startups. Now, some of these are like obviously captured within the data points of all the incubators and accelerators that we have in the region. But there's a lot of startups that are just not, you know, they haven't even been known. We know that they're out there, but they're not part of an accelerator or they're not part of a community. They're just like they 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 love it here. They started their company here, but they're trying to get funding from like the Valley or from New York or somewhere
Yeah.
else. So like they don't spend a lot of time here because they're getting their money from somewhere else. But they want to live here because it's a great place to be. So, and I've seen that a lot actually. I talked to a lot of founders and it's very interesting to hear them talk about why they don't want to move. They'd rather struggle and figure out how to get their business going in this region with the little funding that they get out of the region versus moving away and then kind of missing out on living in the region. So yeah, I think those are a couple things to note.
And that's a really interesting problem that you just brought up, which is there's people who are in the Tampa Bay region because of the fact that they really love being there, but they're getting their investment dollars from elsewhere. And
Hmm.
so this might be too specific of a question, but I'm curious if you know the reason why. Like, why aren't more founders able to get the investment money in Tampa Bay specifically?
That's an easy one. And I'll just draw in from people that are way more experienced than me. But also people that I admire here in the region. But like, Tim Holcomb is one. He's the CEO of Embark Collective. And there's other similar like him, like Becca, who runs the Arc Innovation,
Hmm.
Spark Labs out of Arc Innovation in St. Pete. But I think we can all agree that like the number one reason is we don't have enough people with the funds in the area, right?
Hmm.
The wealth hasn't stayed here, and we're starting to see it come, right? We're getting a lot more that are moving out to Miami. That's fine. It's obviously a wealthier city, and like people that have wealth, that's where they want to live. But also, again, it's just the relativity of the investment funds that are out there, the groups like A16Z, Y Combinator, these other massive groups that have roots in other places that aren't really looking down here and or sending their scouts, sending people with the investment dollars down here to support the founders in the area. So I think
Hmm.
that's why for many years they've been going out to go seek it. But I think that's slowly changing. I think there are a number of groups and individuals who have really seen the value and who are starting to notice Tampa Bay where they're saying, I'm gonna spend some time down there. Whether
Hmm.
that's like me actually living down there or maybe I frequently visit to talk to the founders. We're starting to see that more. And I will also say, like a lot of corporate companies are leaning into, investing in the region, right? So like they also have a large financial resources that can support founders, and some of them are building, innovation arms or venture arms within the corporate company to seek out startups that can help solve their problems. A
Hmm.
good example of that is TGH, right? Tampa General Hospital. They have their own group called TGH Ventures that their entire focus is to find health tech startups, right? Which is, you know, like how often does that happen? How often do you find a corporate company that's like, I'm willing to invest a couple $1 million or however much they have. I don't exactly know, but I know it's a significant amount where they would dedicate to whether that's an acquisition of a health tech startup or, funding them to like support them maybe they become a vendor, whatever that situation is, they're leaning into that. And so it's no
Hmm.
longer becoming like go find an angel investor or go find a VC, but there's a corporate company here that's willing to give you dollars if you help solve their problems because they not that they can't solve it themselves, maybe they just don't have the resources or the people to do it, and they would rather have somebody else that's already solving that problem. They just need some support and some help,
Yeah.
which I think is a very interesting model. But so yeah.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And I think you brought up a good point too, that I kind of feel like in any city that might not get a lot of love as a city for tech people, but I feel like it's the responsibility of the people who have found their success in that city to then work to bring people to it. It's like once you reach a status, like give a helping hand to another tech founder or someone else who really wants to settle down roots and continue to draw people in. Because it's really just people telling a friend or telling a business partner about the area that will really make a big impact of bringing people closer to the region.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you said it perfectly.
And one question for you is, how do you sleep? I mean, you have Tampa Bay Tech Week, you have your job with the federal government, and you have Vida Talent Solutions. Like, how do you personally juggle so many projects?
That's a good question. I also didn't mention that I have two kids. Um,
Oh my goodness.
so yeah, I mean, I think like for me, it's boundaries and balance,
Yeah.
right? Even as an entrepreneur, like I know some people will be like, "Oh, you're not hustling hard enough." I'm like, look, you only get a set number of hours and days in your life for the people around you.
Hmm.
And for me, like my kids are like number one, right? Like I will, I don't care if the president himself shows up at my house. If I have something scheduled with my daughter, or something going on, sorry, Mr. President, I'm gonna see you later. I'll see you after this, graduation or, this, little dance that my daughter has. She's only 5. So, it's like, but like, and a lot of people don't put it in, they don't see it this way, but like for me, like I have a 5-year-old, right? And I have 13 more years with her. After that, she's gonna live her own life and then what, right? So
Yeah.
so you only get a certain number of time and days. And so for me, like there are times and throughout the day that I carve out and say like I'm not touching these, right?
Hmm.
What if somebody calls me, sure, I'll take the call if like maybe my kids are busy with something or whatever. But again, I think it's like it's letting people know where your boundaries are. And also like for me, I have like 6 different emails. So I sync it all. Thank God for AI nowadays, right? There's like note takers and all sorts of like chat bots and things that like I can leverage that maybe I didn't have a couple
Hmm.
years ago. So a lot of those things keep me in check too. And I sync all my calendars to make sure that like I don't try to miss a meeting. There are some days where it gets a little overwhelming, but um yeah, I mean again, I think like those for me are like the biggest things is like I know like and I said this to somebody recently. I'm like, we're not doing brain surgery, right? Like nobody's gonna die if I didn't take a meeting or if like, if we got to push the call till tomorrow morning. And I've had the mentality for a while. I used to be very like go, 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 like this has got to get done right now and everything is urgent. And at some point I made the transition. I forgot what it was that made me think that way. Maybe it was the birth of my kids, but um it was more so just the fact that like if it's something urgent that requires my attention, if it's not something else that's already taken that time, then sure, like I'll
Hmm.
stop what I'm doing and hop on that. Um, Otherwise, like yeah, again, like if it's something that can wait till 5, 6, 7 in the morning, then let's do it then. Let's not do it at 1 o'clock in the morning or 12 at midnight. Um, so I mean that's just my mentality. Not everybody thinks like that, and that's okay. So because everybody else has different circumstances. So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, right? Is
Hmm.
like, just remember to have that time to set those boundaries. And also the other thing I mentioned is like I also make time for my own mental health. Like
Yeah.
we talked about it earlier, right? With the running and stuff. And like for me, like going to the gym and stuff like that, like that's my time where like the rest of the world doesn't exist for that hour,
Hmm.
like I'm just dedicated to what I'm doing at that point in time. And there are times where like I think about that's actually where a lot of my good ideas come from is like I'll just be doing a sat and then like, huh, like I start thinking about this and I'll write it in my notes as I'm finishing or like as I finish that set um because it clears my head. But I again I try to intentionally carve that time in whether it's in the morning, in the middle of the day, whatever. If I go too long without it, and I get a little ornery, and I'm like, oh, I need to get that time in. Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, so those are just a couple things that I do to like keep myself sane amidst the chaos.
100%. And I feel like this is such a cliche saying, but it really is true. But it's the whole idea of you can't pour from an empty cup. So, like, you really need to be filling up your own cup and taking care of yourself in order to continue supporting the people that you've set out to support.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to take care of yourself. I mean,
Hmm.
again, it moves quick, and next thing you know, your life flashes before you, and it's like,
Yeah,
that's it, that's it, you know. So yeah, I mean, you definitely have to take care of yourself, and give yourself that time, but also like, you help others kind of get in that same rhythm too.
absolutely. And one of my favorite questions to ask our guests is to give a shout out to someone in tech that they're really admiring right now. So it could be a fellow community builder, a
Oh
VC, founder, anyone that's really inspiring you lately. Would love to hear it.
man, that is tough.
I
That
know, because you know so many people.
is. Well, I don't really know this person, but I've been watching her content for a while. She's a futurist. Her name is Sinead Bovell. And I really admire how she stepped up over the years. So if you look her up, I hope to meet her one day because she's incredibly smart. But she talks a lot about how AI is impacting the world and how
Mhm.
we should be thinking about it. I mean, again, she's a futurist, right? She's been on like CNN and MSNBC and the morning news, and she's been in the White House to like advise, different groups, but she's so young, right? Like I think we're probably about the same age, and to have stepped into that role, and be like a leading voice in this changing time in the world, I think is really an admirable thing, and to also like stick to her ethics and morals, which I think like right now it's very easy to like be involved in AI and be consumed by the fact that like, if you hop in on it early, then you're going to be financially well off. But I think what I appreciate about what she talks about is that you still have to have your morals and ethics in place as you're
Mhm.
thinking about these things, right? Like whether that's like, this whole conversation around data centers, right? Like how it's impacting people that are, they're drinking water and their energy, and it's just like things like that they may seem controversial and or political, but they really aren't.
Mhm.
I think, it's about thinking about how can we do these things that we want to do, have like AI and all these things, but also like do it responsibly and like take care of the people around us. And so anyway, I like I see some of that content. I'm like, "Man, we think exactly the same. Like I just like I really appreciate that. And I'm not the only crazy one that's thinking these things, right? So so anyway, I was just, I guess I'd give her a shout out, but I don't know if she'd
That's a
hear
good
it
one.
one day.
Yeah, I love it. Hey, Suze, this has been such an awesome episode, and I've so enjoyed having you on the show to share everything that you've built with Tampa Bay Tech Week. And I'd love to have you share with our listeners where they can find you online in case they'd like to connect.
Yeah. Well, I'm very active on LinkedIn. So if you find me on LinkedIn, Jesus Vidaurri, I'm probably one of the only few people on there with that name. And then yeah, same thing on my socials. A little weird as I've been trying to transition from Instagram is my other main platform.
Mhm.
So to be Jesus.Vidaurri underscore. And yeah, I would say those are the two main places where you could find me. And then of course like Tech Week and stuff like that. But yeah.
Amazing. I'll include those spots in the show notes for listeners to easily find you. But thank you so much again for coming on today's podcast.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you for the time.